All right, so there you go. Quite an interesting story there of the Masai Mara. Before we can jump into hot topics at 8 a.m., perhaps I hope that you have your hot topics for the week in terms of what stood out for you in the pop culture scene. A very important conversation we're going to have for the next few minutes, and this is the aspect of fighting HIV and AIDS here in the country. But from a very unique perspective, a very unique point of view, how is it that senior government officials and the corporate world, the bosses and the CEOs, what role do they have to play in the mandate when it comes to fighting HIV and AIDS, not only here in Kenya, but truly on the African continent? Allow me to introduce my guest this morning. I have Dr. Samuel Kinyanjui. He is the AIDS Healthcare Foundation. He's the country director for AIDS Healthcare Foundation. Dr. Kinyanjui, it's always good to have you here with us. This is quite important that we're discussing HIV and AIDS from a different perspective. The fact that we want to see the big boys, the big girls, the CEOs, the government officials playing a key role in this. Why is it so important to have them be involved this deep when it comes to HIV and AIDS?
Thank you very much for welcoming here. I don't take it for granted. The AHF as an organization understands that following our mission, that is cutting-edge medicine and advocacy, we noticed that there's a gap in bringing the captains of industries, of government, into the perspective of HIV at a personal level. And we have realized that there's a niche opportunity in golf.
Right.
So every year, AHF Kenya organizes what we call the Chairman's Golf Tournament. And for this year, it will be held tomorrow at Muthaiga Golf Club. Mm-hmm. We want to bring HIV knowledge and advocacy at a very personal level, away from the big offices and the bureaucracies that are in their offices. We want to bring it at a personal level and mingle it with a sport than this high executive like. And this is golf.
So, and you get to find them at the golf course?
Yes.
So, apart from, with government officials, they can influence it in terms of policies. But what about corporates, the CEOs? What's their role in that? How can they be involved?
The CEOs, as the team leads of their organization, when they are designing their policies, workplace HIV policies are very important. And if we get them to buy this idea at that level, it will become much, much easier because HIV knows no borders. And it's not a preserve or only a duty of the government. It's for us all to influence, to ensure that advocacy and other key important things like safe sex are implemented at all sectors of our community. And that's where they come in.
Okay.
In addition to this, as one of the key things that's happening in the HIV world now is the dwindling funds, particularly funds from abroad.
Funds, right.
Yes, and for this reason, it's important that we bring in the corporates because we will need not only domestic investments, but also philanthropy to ensure that we can continue. We can see we have made progress on HIV control, but we need to ensure that this fight, we do not lose the momentum that we have right now.
Okay.
Yes.
Dr. Kinyanjui, you've said something very important there. The fact that funds are dwindling, nevertheless, perhaps funds from philanthropists and even other CEOs and organizations can help close this gap. Nevertheless, do you believe that the upper class here in Kenya, the rich, the wealthy, are proper philanthropists that we've seen perhaps with what we know abroad happening? You find like someone like Bill Gates has already spent up close to $26 billion of his wealth when it comes to charity. Do you believe that philanthropists here in Kenya in the upper class are also quite sensitive when it comes to philanthropy?
I want to believe that the Kenyans that are well-to-do would love to help. However, it depends on how we present this topic to them. Mm-hmm. We notice that the philanthropists across the world do this because their governments have policies that encourage them to donate, to give to the less fortunate. They have tax breaks that comes with the donation that they give. And I think that's something we need to do here also. We need to recognize them when they donate. And the government needs to recognize them by introducing tax breaks and other policies that will encourage this to happen. Mm-hmm. So I think it's a topic that is important and it's a topic that we can encourage but it also needs to come with benefits. I am told by Professor Milton Friedman, a famous economist, that there is no free lunch. So anything that's given, there is something that is received in return. It may not be monetary, it may be in kind, but it may just be a recognition. I don't think we recognize the people who donate in this country as they are recognized elsewhere.
Right, Dr.
I think that's where the issues are.
They are. What are some of the trends, especially when it comes to the fight of HIV and AIDS here in Kenya? What are some of the current trends that we're seeing?
We're seeing very positive trends. Noting that now you are to look at the key 90-90-90 and the numbers, the number of people who know their HIV status. We are edging to nearly past the 80% mark or thereabout. The people on care also, the same mark. And this is very positive. The challenges that we are having that we need to keep in perspective, besides the funding, which is a big worrisome. The other thing is the relative increase in the number of new infection among the youth. We have very positive numbers about transmission of HIV from mothers to children. And we want to give a big thanks to the Beyond Zero campaign, and other people have come to the forefront to help this happen. But we are not there yet. And that's why I said from the outset that we need to make sure that the funding that's necessary to keep this fire burning, we need to ensure that it's available. The interesting part I would want to also mention is the issue of universal health coverage. And the coming of the universal health coverage is a great opportunity, but it can also be a tricky area for two reasons. First, if we assume that by just including HIV into the universal health coverage and listing it there as one of the areas to be covered without designating specific funds, then it will be a big tragedy. But if we are strategic and ensure that these topics not only available in the part of essential package, but earmarked funds are there included, then as a country we may make great trends.
All right. What inspired AIDS Healthcare Foundation to target the executive branch here in Kenya? Where did that come from? Where did that inspiration come from?
I'd like to say that this is the great wisdom of our chairman, Ambassador Stephen Karau. And he noticed that among this senior executive, the facts, the real facts about HIV and the passion for it was missing, because most of the campaigns that we organize, or NGOs organize, government organize, they are targeting mwananchi. And the way they are designed, they do not communicate to the senior executive who has very little time and are very busy. So, and that's how Ambassador Karau decided that it's important we find something that we engage our senior executive. And it has become very popular. We've held it for a couple of years in Kiambu Golf Club. But this year we have moved a notch higher and went to the Premier Club of Muthaiga Golf Club. Yes.
All right. So, Dr. Kinyanjui, you're not only the country director for AHF, you've also served within NACOP, the National AIDS and STI Control Program. I'd love to know what are some of the milestones that we have achieved as a country when it comes to HIV and AIDS, say for the past 10 years?
I'd like to say that the key milestones that we need to observe first is that over the last 10 years, first, getting HIV people on treatment was a big deal. And we noticed that initially we just used to wait for people to not only have HIV, but actually develop AIDS, which is terrible. But it's because the drugs were very expensive. We owe a lot of thanks to PEPFAR, Global Fund, and even the government for making this possible. We have moved from less than 10% of the people infected with HIV accessing treatment to over 80%. We have moved from a time when 40% of our children were being born from mothers who have HIV or being born with being infected from their mother to less than 8%. And we are almost edging to the 5%, which is considered elimination. We have also noted other things that we have also done is the number of sites were very few. Now we have more than, I should guess we have more than 3,000 sites where people can get treated. In addition to this, the level of stigma. has reduced, because we can talk about HIV anywhere, everywhere. Previously, it was a harsh topic.
Nevertheless, young people seem to be the highest when it comes to the current statistics of people living with HIV and AIDS.
Not the highest. Why we're worried about young people, they are our future parents. We're worried about them is the relative increase in new infection. That is where the challenge is. They've been born free of HIV, but they're getting it when early on as young youth and young adults, and is predominantly girls are more disadvantaged because of engaging sometimes in casual or transaction sex with persons that are several years older. Many in their 40s and 50s. Yes.
Okay. So you mentioned that funds, Dr. Kinenjui, that is one of the biggest challenges and perhaps one of the prohibitors when it comes to seeing AIDS-free nation.
Yes.
Apart from funds, what else is sort of stopping this from being actualized as a dream here in Kenya?
I would like to say that funds is significant, but the other biggest challenges are some of the cultural practices that we have, that some of them being early marriages, teenage marriages, actually girls 13, 14. And this is a big risk because this is a person who has not grown up to be able to make decisions.
Right.
The other thing is when it comes to children leaving school much earlier.
School dropouts.
School dropouts is a major contribution, but also transaction sex. In addition to this, we have some of cultural practices, for example, the fight against the use of condoms. We know that this may be a taboo to some places, but we need to think beyond just being moral about this subject and become practical and look at what biomedically works, and the condom works. And for this reason, one of the challenges is maintaining the condom distribution, availability, and making them accessible. I think is still a big challenge that we need to address going forward. In terms of funds, I'd like to say something that is unique to AIDS Healthcare Foundation. AIDS Healthcare Foundation is not the usual type of NGO. AIDS Healthcare Foundation works on a business model that we call shared value. On one hand, it runs businesses in the US, from which it generates most of the funds and the resources that it deploys for its social duties, like controlling HIV and AIDS in Kenya and across the group. And we are edging towards the 1 million patient mark. We hope to get there by the end of this year. In Kenya, we just crossed the 51,000 mark just a few weeks ago. So the key thing, sustainability for HF, is because they are running a business that funds its social approach. Most of the other NGOs, they will look for donations, and when the donations stop, then it becomes difficult for them to continue.
All right, so as much as probably HF handles the financial perspective of it, nevertheless, if we do not solve the core issue of this, which like we've already mentioned, early marriages, FGM, school dropout, transaction in sex, we will still be going around the same mountain, right? And as someone who has also served within NASCOP, perhaps what is it that is being done on the ground to tackle the key issues, which are those perhaps four that I've mentioned?
Well, I'm not qualified at this point in time to comment about the NASCOP or the government institutions. I'd generally say what is expected and what is happening across the globe, and specifically in Kenya. One of the key things is about how business is being done. I'd like to say that with the support of the international community, there's a new approach to HIV programming, looking not at inputs, but results. For example, I'm aware that the counties are organizing what they are called business plans for elimination of mother-to-child transmission of HIV, we call EMTCT. They are looking at business plans. They're looking at how many children do we want, how many mothers need this service, and how do we deliver it to them? How do we ensure that children remain HIV-free, and those who have HIV can access the care and treatment they need on time? This is a very unusual way of doing things, and I think this is a way that we need to encourage all the other aspects and departments within the HIV, within TB, and even within the health industry, Ministry of Health, to approach it from the output perspective, so that it's much easier to focus the efforts. Because at this point in time, we believe the tools we have as a world, as a country, against HIV, if we put our effort in a more synergistic way, if we orchestrate our efforts, then it is possible to ensure that transmission is stopped and no one gets AIDS.
All right.
Yeah.
So, Dr. Kenji, probably as your closing remarks, I'd really love to hear from you what you'd want to see the government do, especially President Uhuru Kenyatta, as is within his last term. His wife is very passionate about women and children.
Yes.
First Lady Margaret Kenyatta, and the fact that, you're not only targeting business executives, but senior government officials who make the policies and really help HIV prevention from a policy point of view. What would you like to see them doing?
In terms of policies that I would like to see the government enact, and this is where the senior executive come in, and our excellent President and Madam Margaret Kenyatta. The key thing is to make sure that the focus is on the results. The focus is patient-centered. A lot of the time is that interventions are seen focused only on inputs and processes that do not guarantee that mwananchi benefits. So I think that's one of the key things. But most importantly, the issue is that HIV also and other programs need not only to be included in health facilities, they also need to be integrated. We will find that in some hospitals, HIV and other priority programs are considered part of the national government, and the county governments sometimes consider that part of the national government, and this, when it comes to resource allocation at the county level, you will notice that HIV, TB, and other priority programs get very little, sometimes none. And this is something I'd like them to address.
Thank you so much, Dr.